Merry early Christmas, everyone! Welcome to The Good, the Bad, and the Television, where I take a look at everything related to the small screen. And today, for the Season 1 finale, I'm going to be taking a look at one of my favorite voice actors. And what better timing, considering that by the time this episode is released, it would have been his 100th heavenly birthday. But before I tell you who he is, I should mention two other people, because I know I'm going to get some people who will ask. So today would have also been Frank Zappa's 82nd heavenly birthday, and it is the 74th birthday of famous actor Samuel L. Jackson. But today I am going to be talking about Paul Winchell, who for a long time was my favorite voice actor of all time. Now that honor goes to Mel Blanc, but I still consider Paul Winchell to be a very good voice actor, and let me tell you why. Now, believe it or not, Paul Winchell has a pretty complex history. If you want to know more, I suggest reading the book Winch. However, I do advise that you come in with a strong stomach, as it delves into a lot of verbal abuse. Not from Winchell, of course, but from his mother. I also recommend saving up your money because the book can now go for $140.23. So, to keep things simple, I'm going to go over his career. Our story begins back in 1935, when Paul Winchell saw an advertisement for a ventriloquist set for only 10 cents. Judging by the inflation of 10 cents in 2022 back then, that's not as cheap, but it is still a bargain compared to what ventriloquist kits cost nowadays. Anyways, he asked his teacher if he could purchase the kit and have it be his art credit, to which the teacher agreed. And thus began the career of Paul Winchell with his creation, Jerry Mahoney. A few years later, he would create another character to bounce off Jerry Mahoney, and this would be Knucklehead Smith. And together, Paul Winchell and his dummies began appearing on several different programs. However, they were overshadowed by Edgar Bergen and his characters. But this did not stop Paul Winchell from pursuing his ventriloquist career. In the meantime, however, he had also been inventing many different things, most notably a patent for the artificial heart. However, these inventions never really went anywhere because Paul Winchell was more of an amateur inventor. But especially with the patent for the artificial heart, it did manage to catch the attention of the University of Utah, though this never went anywhere. But at least Paul Winchell could say he helped save a few lives. Then in 1968, his career came to an all-time high when he got the role of Dick Dastardly from Hanna-Barbera's 1968 masterpiece, Wacky Races. And from there, not only would he do ventriloquism, but he would also do voice acting, becoming most well-known as being the original voice of Tigger from Winnie the Pooh and Gargamel from the Smurfs. But that did not last very long, as in 1999, he retired from acting altogether, along with ventriloquism, seeing as he had suffered verbal abuse for many years by his mother, which is absolutely not cool. No one should have to suffer verbal abuse. Then, in his home, on June 24th, 2005, Paul Winchell passed away due to natural causes. And so, from there, Jim Cummings, who had been voicing Winnie the Pooh since the New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh in the 1980s, would go on to become the voice of Tigger as well, and his daughter April Winchell has since become a legendary voice actress. And that's the history of Paul Winchell's career. Now let's get into why I like Paul Winchell so much, shall we? So after thinking about why I love Paul Winchell so much, I think I have divided my sections into 3 key points. Number 1, he bounced off the other actors very well. Something that is very vital in the animation industry is for the animators and the voice actors to work well with each other on set. Otherwise, the product is not going to be very pleasant. In the case of Paul Winchell, he got along with the actors very well, I think, and you can hear that in the recordings of these shows. or movies. Whether it be with The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, The Fox and the Hound, The Smurfs, or even Frankenstein Jr. and The Impossibles, you can always hear that Paul Winchell was having fun when doing these roles, and he bounced off the other actors very well. Number 2. He worked with his limitations. So I think we can all agree that Paul Winchell did not have the most vocal range, but then again, to be fair, how else are you going to compete with the likes of Mel Blanc or Frank Welker? Well, I'm going to tell you how. You work with your limitations to make the characters seem different. This is kind of like a John Candy approach, where the sound of the characters in multiple projects are the same, but you never really think too much of it because the characters, in the way they're written and how they feel, is completely different from one another. And that's mainly thanks to the actor for working with the script very well. That is especially the case with not just John Candy, but also Robin Williams, Tom Hanks, and yes, even Paul Winchell. He worked with his limited vocal range to deliver some great performances. Take Tigger, for instance. Not only did he use that voice for Tigger, but he also used the voice for Goober in Goober and the Ghost Chasers, as well as Boomer from The Fox and the Hound. And yet they never all felt like the same character because of the way they were written and some of their actions. Oh, so take Gargamel. Paul Winchell used that voice for many different villainous characters he portrayed, and some even good characters as well. But yeah, he worked with his limited vocal range to deliver some great performances. And number 3, which I think is the most important one, his deliveries were always on point. Now, I've already mentioned this with the first 2 points a bit, but this especially applies here, where Paul Winchell never once gave a bad performance. Again, going back to John Candy, Robin Williams, and Tom Hanks, you never once felt like they gave a bad performance because they were just that great of actors. The same can also be said for other actors, too, particularly with Mel Blanc, Dudley Moore, Frank Welker, and Carol Spinney. Never once did they give bad performances. But here's the catch, and not all voice actors can do this perfectly. When you try too hard, it can end up being an annoying performance and thus can ruin the overall voice acting scope. And thus it makes the characters themselves seem really annoying and not really worth getting invested into. This is a problem with some characters voiced by Tom Kenny, D. Bradley Baker, and especially Tara Strong. However, Paul Winchell never fell into that trap, because he knew what was the right balance and what was too low or too high of effort. And yeah, I don't have much else to say. But there is another point I'd like to bring up, and this is just something that I personally thought up of. He knew when to stop. Now, what I mean by that is that if the project he was involved with didn't seem that good going after a certain point, then he would not be involved whatsoever following forward. A great example is with the Smurfs. After season 8, he stayed on for a little bit of the final season, but then after that, he left the show altogether because he just wasn't interested. And after reading some of the scripts, I can kind of understand where he's coming from, though I am sad he left the show. Another example is with Frankenstein Jr. and The Impossibles. As mediocre of a show that was, at least it had some fun voice acting, and the highlights are Alan Reed and of course Paul Winchell. But Paul Winchell only appeared in 3 episodes as 3 different villains, and that was honestly a good choice because the show would have gone downhill after that had he been involved some more. And then finally, and most importantly, there's Tigger. After 1999, he left the role altogether as well as retired from acting, leaving Jim Cummings to take over the role. However, it is worth noting that he had actually alternated with Jim Cummings during the original run of The New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, because he wanted to take a break from the role. And honestly, I actually understand, because having to voice the character multiple times can get a bit overwhelming. And plus, it'll make your reputation look stale. So it's nice to have a good variety. And I applaud Paul Winchell for taking that decision with pride, and I applaud Disney for actually listening to him. Just wish they did the same thing with Robin Williams, but that's another story altogether. But yeah, that's why I like Paul Winchell so much. Sorry if this video felt a little, iffy. I was just trying to get this thing, ready by the time Paul Winchell's birthday came out. And by the time this comes out, it might have already been Christmas, or it might be Christmas Day. But anyways, thanks for watching Season 1 of The Good, the Bad, and the Television. Tell me what you think of it, and what was your favorite episode to come from the show? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and I may check them out. Also, if there is a show you would like for me to review, or if there's a movie based on a TV show that you would like for me to review, let me know in the comments below, and I will consider them. So what am I going to do for the Season 1 premiere? Well, I'm going to be taking a look at lost media related to a show that I've already talked about. Here's a hint. It's better than Peppa Pig and even Bluey.